Top Gun risks it all, reaching for the stars to bring home the golden goose. Coming next on Mythimo Channel News. He made his name as a hotshot fighter pilot at the Top Gun Naval School. But has pilot Maverick's tricky manoeuvres and reckless risk-taking gone next level? Is it a flight or fancy? Or does his old co-pilot Goose still exist? Well, according to Maverick, he dreams that he lives on in a much higher dimension and has made it his mission to ascend there, retrieve him and bring him home. But what giant challenges await him in the danger zone, and will he and Goose land safely to share their tale? Do you recognise this archetypal tale? Yes, it's Jack and the Beanstalk. His story could just as well be Top Gun's, as we've just heard. It could be your story or mine. Male or female, young or mature, Jack's archetypal powers are imprinted in our collective psyche. Hi, thank you for tuning in again. We had a terrific response to our last video on Little Red Riding Hood. And yes, we're going to be doing Jack and the Beanstalk today, the second in our series of 22 fairy tales. And we think it's wonderful that you've been in touch and asked us your questions through our website, mythimo.com.au, and that you're really enjoying the archetypal journey of the fairy tales, which essentially tell us about human behaviour. It's a psychology course in human behaviour, studying these fairy tales, let me tell you. Well, here are the cards. This has been a great development. We finally got our prototype, the Mythimo cards, which are the 22 paintings now in card form, so that we can use them for reading in collaboration with clients, with ourselves, and we can find out, plumb the depths of these fairy tales really, look to the mysteries. They, rather than interpreting them, they're helping elucidate the mysteries of life, and particularly of human behaviour, which, as we know, can be very tricky. And speaking of tricky, we're looking at Jack and the Beanstalk today, and you can see the painting behind me, and here is the card. And it is rich with symbolism, and we'll talk about the art symbolism in another episode, but today we're going to look at the hero's journey again and the 12 steps, the archetypal steps one takes through the lens of Jack. Thank you for joining us. Jack is the classic maverick, the Top Gun archetype, who does things his way, different from the norm. Setting out on his hero's journey, looking to elevate himself into the stratosphere of society, a better place to land than were his roots. Jack's elixir is to act from one's innate skill set, in other words, one's natural talents, and employ high levels of motivation to achieve goals. His experience has taught him that it's no good trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So it's time to work out what your natural talents are and align them with the choice of work you do or the goals you go after. Jack shares that we must work to our strengths if we are to move on up and bring home the golden goose. The flip side of Jack is the trickster archetype, in shadow. He would rather manipulate than negotiate life's transactions. What he's doing is essentially looking for an unfair advantage when he goes after the magic beans with the promise of becoming more. But he has a lesson in that. We'll get to that. In Jack's mother's view, he was a bit tricky when he disobeyed her and traded the family cow, a commodity, for a few beans from a potential con man. He put the whole family's survival at risk in one impulsive moment. Luckily for Jack, it turned out to be a risk worth taking, but this sort of spontaneity might not always work out well next time. So the better way for Jack to go is to work on developing and applying his skills to create his own rewards rather than rely on chance. This video helps us to understand the psychological pattern of the Maverick's path, before taking steps towards a promotion or an elevation of circumstances. And hopefully you'll find some relevance in that. We're all mavericks looking for improvement in our lives, so stay tuned. This video is part of the Mythimo Archetypes series, which presents fairy tale and mythic archetypes to reveal the psychic patterning and shadow elements, so we may do the integrative work to reclaim our light and become whole and happier ever after. Jack's hero's journey is the same 12-step journey you and I have followed and will follow again every time we start something new. His is in the context of going after something better than where we're currently standing. The journey itself is an archetype, so it is a classic model, in other words, that all of us follow always. So let's take the steps according to Campbell's circuitous model that took Jack from the base of the beanstalk to the giant's heavenly palace and back home again, victorious, to the family home. Every time we take on a peak experience, as Jack did, and a peak experience might be wanting to climb Mount Everest, as you would expect, but it might also be going for a new job, deciding to have a baby, living in a new city. Lots of things are peak experiences. They're anything that really challenges beyond something we've done before, taking us next level. So when we do engage in a peak experience, we emerge with an evolved skill set, braver, wiser, better, and more spiritually evolved by the end of it, if we've learned the lessons therein. And even if not, we've still got something to take away, haven't we? But in Jack's case, he became more adept and learned the value of planning ahead, not just relying on magic. These characteristics equate to us becoming more self-efficacious, a state described by Jung, the eminent psychologist and psychiatrist, as self-actualization. Whether we refer to this elevated state of being as actualized, individuated, autonomous, whole, integrated, we, like Jack, must go through the 12 steps, this archetypal process, every time before we'll achieve it. That's next. Starting with step 1, Jack leaves the ordinary world that he knows, his mother's home. And he then will go into step 2, which is taking that call to adventure. So let's see what they are. So he takes off from base to make a trade, ostensibly doing a man's job. This is when he leaves the ordinary home. When the trickster tempts him with the beans with an unknown portent for the cow, he recklessly risks everything, taking the punt on them living up to their promise of life-changing magic. So his adventure begins. He's picked up the call. Now, step 3 is where one can refuse the call. One thinks again, oh no, I can't do this, I better turn back. Oh, this is too hard, or maybe I'm going in beyond my capabilities. Anyway, he might have refused the call, refused the opportunity, the ridiculous trade of a cow for beans, but then he would have refused the potential calling him on to a better life out there. So he also might have been put off by the voice of authority and refused to ascend the heavens when the beans actually sprouted the next day. He might have gone, I'm already in trouble, I better leave it. But no, he made the decision to go after his grail. All right, so now Jack's at a point where he'll meet a mentor. He could meet a really helpful mentor that takes him by the hand and demonstrates what one must do in life and teaches him all the good things, or he could meet an unlikely mentor. Let's see. At this point, the hero encounters the giant in his palace on high and sees how the other half lives. The giant is an unlikely mentor, but he shows Jack that the impossible is possible. And the giant has his family's golden goose. He recognizes this as the one that was stolen from his family years ago. And Jack looks at it and says, hey, this is the very same ticket to my success. Next, he's standing on a threshold. Once again, having to make a decision. That's what standing on the threshold is. Do I, don't I? So this is step 5. Jack pauses to observe the giant, his wife, and the goose. This is his last chance to opt out before the bigger risks come into play and will confront him in ways that he may not be prepared for. So some will back off at this point. Will Jack? In a moment of clarity, he recognizes his opportunity. He crosses the divide, makes his dash, and goes for it. He grabs that goose. Then we come to step 6. This is where you really test it, right? He was on the threshold wondering about his tests. He took a risk again, and he will meet friends and he'll meet foes at this point. And this will happen to all of us as we make these decisions to go forward, get out of a rut. But the giant is ginormous, ruthless and ferocious. He wants Jack's guts for garters. The artful maverick makes a dash. He grabs the friendly goose and gets away from his foe in tow. Now he comes to step 7, sometimes called the belly of the whale, but also known as the cave of despair. And this is this cave we go into, according to Campbell, where we'll find our treasure in an unlikely place, but here we find it. So as Jack descends the beanstalk with the giant in hot pursuit, he thinks about how mad this adventure has been, from the moment he received the magic beans to retrieving the golden goose from its heavenly home. He swears to himself that there may not be the same luck next time. He realizes the seeds of golden opportunity were in this moment, but he wouldn't want to push it, he's thinking. I've been very lucky to get this far and still be alive. His overconfidence might cost him his life next time, or at least his livelihood. And that is what one does, one after a big adventure thinks about what's happened. And now he will face an ordeal. He will. This is step 8. The ordeal is not over. He can feel the giant's angry breath on his neck right up until the moment he alights from the beanstalk and gets away. Phew! If the giant had caught him, he would have made a bloody meal of him and taken back the goose. All would have been lost. So we are talking now about the reward. And this is what every hero can look forward to, whether it's an epiphany, something that changes us and gives us a better perspective, or whether it's actually something tangible. Well, in Jack's case, it was tangible. It was the golden goose, the goose that laid the golden eggs. But although he's not conscious of it yet, moreover, there is a larger reward, and that is the knowledge that he went after what he wanted, aspired for something higher, and came up against giant odds and still managed to skillfully achieve his goals on his own merits in the end. And that is so important for us to know we could do something, and we did it. We pulled it off. It's life-changing, that moment. Oh, what a feeling. But how would he explain what happened to his mother or the authorities? Might they look at the goose and say, ill-gotten gains? So let's think about the road back. What does he do from there? And the road back is sometimes fraught with more ordeals. So we're nearly there. It's like, why do so many car accidents happen 5 minutes from home? It's the same kind of energy that happens here. You will think you've made it, take that big sigh of relief, only to come up against something and be ill prepared for it. So always know when you're nearly there, you've got to redouble your efforts. Jack stood at the bottom of the beanstalk to come up with the right explanation before returning to the nest. More challenges await. But he will be more matured, a wiser young man, braver, stronger, well, at least in the context of negotiating his way forward and upwards in life. So he's now acquired a knowledge he can do it. It's like when they didn't know they could run a 4-minute mile, nobody ran it. Then when someone ran it, everyone could do it who was in that area of competition. Once you know you can do it, you'll do it again. Only next time you want to do it better. Such is the road back. So now we're talking about the resurrection. So We're at step 11, and step 12 is where the journey comes to its end. So before starting again, because starting has no end. These heroes' journeys, you finish one, you start another, so it's ongoing. So in Jack's case, he knew he got lucky with the magic beans and retrieving the family's golden goose. And he came to think, well, you know, I was tricky about all that. I better not be so dodgy next time because they might land me in trouble. I really came close to dying. So because of this peak adventure, he went from being a tricky, shallow and overconfident madcap youth to a resourceful and skillful young man who's prepared to put a bit of planning and be a bit more circumspect with what he does. When new opportunities presented, he would grasp the nettle by both hands, but apply his skills more appropriately than ever before. And now we know we've got version 2 of Jack. We've got Jack the Wiser. And we come to step 12, and this is where Jack, the wiser, the braver, the stronger, the more adept, wants to share his elixir with everyone. He's excited. Well, it worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you too. Look, if I can do it, so can you. Jack doesn't angle for an unfair advantage these days, and magic alone won't manifest Jack's dreams. Jack's elixir is to work to your strengths, derive satisfaction from being the very best you can be at what you do, aim to beat your personal best and leave others out of the race. You know, there's a negative overtone to having to beat others, even the wording. We want to beat our personal best. That's his elixir. That's the winner's creed if we are to move on up and bring home the golden goose, according to Jack. Despite the glory that Jack experienced, we might all be suspecting that, you know, if he's got a weakness for impulsivity and being a bit dodgy, will this one experience change him? You know, and we all know we can't change others. We can only change ourselves. And we also have to think about the fact that Jack did reflect and he did see that he was lucky. And because he came so close to dying, there's a very good chance he will make amends. But let's say his weaknesses are going to let him down again in the future. Unless he sharpens his consciousness and stays mindful, he could fall for the same old tricks of his unconscious, his shadow. In the next Jack episode, we'll explore how he must own up to his disowned dodgy behaviours, such as trying to have it all without putting in any effort, you know, maximum gain for minimal effort, that type of thinking. Being a grifter, in other words. And he'll have to do that work before he'll be able to trust himself at the negotiating table going forward. Mythimo Archetypes focuses on what one shoves into the shadow recess of their psyche, and it provides a way of reclaiming and integrating it back with the light parts of self. So Jack's impulsivity and young exuberance, where he'd take a risk that could take his life because he's thinking he's invincible, well, he'll need to integrate that back in with the Jack that's skillful, the Jack that's got the common sense not to do those sorts of things. And then eventually he'll be operating congruently from the one place. So, you know, this is what we're all aiming to do. We're trying to work to our strengths and bring in those weaknesses and strengthen them according to our light self. Get them out of shadow, do the work. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to those people who have already subscribed to Patreon, have liked us on Facebook, and gone to our website and sent us some emails that we can personally respond to about shadow issues in themselves and others. That's been wonderful. Keep it up. Also, a lot of people liked our Little Red Riding Hood video and could see themselves in her. And hopefully today you'll see yourself in Jack. I know I've worked with some clients who were looking to elevate themselves with their work and conditions and found the Jack archetype so empowering in that regard. We're going to be looking at Little Mermaid next time, and the Little Mermaid, so here she is. It's a beautiful lovely sensitive painting of the Little Mermaid. Lovely colours, as you can see. So that'll be coming up next. In the meantime, please go to Patreon and become a monthly subscriber. Join our Facebook page. Go to mythimo.com.au. Send us an email from there. Have a look at our beautiful prints. And thank you again from the heart, from Simo and I, for your wonderful support. It's just so encouraging, and we just want to keep coming back and giving you more content. So until then, thank you and bye.